Salutations, to Dave Degenerate, and I am here to pretend that I know what I'm talking about for long enough to do a video on setting up guitars. And I've got a cheap 7-string that I picked up that has not been set up from the factory, so I'm going to sit here and ramble for a bit and then try not to make too much of a mess of this in the video. So anyway, that's the introduction bit over with. I'm going to get on with this. I'm going to take the strings off and I'm going to treat the fretboard with some lemon oil, which I'm not going to show on film because that's not going to be very interesting to watch. So I'll cut to the next bit now. Okay, so I've taken the strings off and I've treated the board with lemon oil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the height of the bridge saddle here. Not the saddle, just the bridge. Now if I get up close to the camera, you can see you have to adjust these screws here to raise and lower it. Now I'm going to lower it, or raise it, up to about 6mm, but this is down to preference. It depends on how high or low you want the strings. So if you're an idiot, you can then set the thing really, really high and then wind yourself up later on when you're trying to play on it, like certain people, Herman Lee. Anyway, if I just take that off, and I can then raise this up to about 6mm. So, up to about here. And on the other side, I don't know if that's showing up on the camera, but this is what I'm doing. That one was already more or less at the right height. And so then just the next stage, making sure of course obviously that we keep this thing dusty. So yes. Another thing, make sure as well that when you put the saddle back in, the screws are facing on the top. So I am now going to put strings on, which again I will not be filming because that would be boring. So, time to restring. I'm going to restring the thing all the way through. Pull it up so there's about 6 inches of slack, and you do one turn over the machine head. This is a really thick string, so this is kind of hard to do right now. And then you just bend that bit up, and then you keep the pressure like that, and then just wind up until you get about 2 to 3 winds with the thicker strings, and then on the thinner strings you want about 4 to 5. And as I said, this is a really thick string and it's not quite going to plan, but this is pretty much how it's done. So, yeah. And make sure obviously that it gets in the right part. There we go. Right, job done. Okay, now I've put new strings on it and I've tuned it up and I've set all that stuff. So next we're going to do the truss rod. Now ordinarily, what you would do with a truss rod, you would put a capo on the first fret and then you would measure it by pressing down there with a feeler gauge or something and then seeing the 8th fret, what the action is like. Now I have a capo, I don't know where it is, and even if I did it wouldn't fit on a 7-string guitar, so I'm going to do this the lazy way. Basically you get a credit card or some description and you put it down round about where the 8th fret is and you see how snug it should be. It should be just enough room to fit it there. And I can see the action on this is way too high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Allen key in the truss rod slot so it slips in like so. I'm going to make a quarter turn, so I'm barely going to turn this thing. Like so. Now if the action is too high, turn it to the left. If it's too low, turn it to the right. But make sure you don't turn it too far, you might break the truss rod. So only do a quarter turn. And make sure as well that you don't go too far one direction, because if it's too high you have really high action, if it's too low you get buzzing and intonation issues. So I'm just going to do this quarter turn here, just to lower the action somewhat and test it up. And that has made it a lot more comfortable looking to play. And I think another slight adjustment and it should be good to go. Move on to the next stage anyway, which will be the intonation adjustments. See how he wants to actually fit in there, which right now doesn't seem like he wants to do. There we go. yeah, I think that is now ready to move on to the intonation. Now I've hooked this up to a multi-effector because I'm using it as a charger. Tuner, not a charger, what I'm about. That just went off. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the intonation. So this is an A note, so I'm keeping a low string in. When I finally hit the right tuning. Come on, nearly there. There we go. Now that's in tune. I'm going to play the 12th fret and I'm going to see if it's sharp or flat. Now that is sharp. So I'm going to take a screwdriver to this screw on top of the bridge there. And I'm just going to turn this slightly to the left or an anti-clockwise way. And that should help adjust it. I'm going to keep doing that until I've basically got all of the strings in tune. This thing is really, really out of whack. We'll stop filming for the time being and then come back to this. Okay, so basically to recap everything I've done then, I've adjusted the truss rod, I've adjusted the height of the strings, I've set the intonation now. This guitar should be pretty much good to go and more or less set up to how I would like it anyway. Actually maybe a little high, but hey, whatever. I now have a 7-string guitar, it has been set up, it has been restrung, and it is ready for me to play. So, job done.